By wrong discrimination, Vijnana arises, severally as eightfold, as ninefold, like waves on the great ocean. We looked at Vijnana back in verse 8 in video number 10, and here we'll look into it in more detail. Vijnana is consciousness, but it's consciousness in a particular mode. Let's take sight as an example. Our eyes function along similar principles to a camera. There are muscles which control the focus and receptors at the back which process the light reflections. But the difference between us and a camera is we know we are seeing something. It's not just that we see something. We know that we're seeing something. We're aware. This is the difference between us and a machine. A lot of people might try to argue that this awareness doesn't exist, in which case they're arguing for their own insentience, and we might as well just leave them to it. That's the difference between us and mechanisms. We are aware. It seems to be an item of faith now, as far as science fiction stories go, that if you make a machine complicated enough, it becomes aware. After all, isn't that what we are? Complicated machines. You make enough connections in the brain, in the electric circuitry, and you've got awareness. There's absolutely no basis for this at all, but this seems to be commonly accepted. This seems to be the commonly accepted paradigm. But this is assuming that the machine comes first and then there's awareness. But clearly it's awareness that comes first, because it's awareness which constructed that paradigm, that theory. It's awareness which thinks of things as machines. So awareness comes first. So this is what we have in this eightfold system of Vijnana. We have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, taste consciousness, smell consciousness, and touch consciousness. And it's not simply awareness of these aspects, these discriminations that we make. We give them reality. We say that we must be experiencing these things as things out there. That somehow we're experiencing these things here from out there. This is the story that consciousness gives us. This is a discriminating consciousness. There's one more sense perception in Indian thinking, and that's the mind. The consciousness that is aware of mental objects. It's aware of thoughts. It's the one that perceives thoughts. And it performs a discrimination of putting some of these thoughts in here. But it also discriminates some thoughts into memories. And then tells us that these memories were things that happened out there. So these are the 6 consciousnesses. And there's a couple more. There's one called manas. This is what's actually doing the discriminating. It's sometimes called the defiled consciousness, because this is the one that's given the reality to all the discriminations that we make. It's saying that that is what is real. And this is simply our mind. Our mind is what organizes all our perceptions, and is what builds up a picture of what we call reality. And it's defiled in the sense that it's not reality. And for that reality, we need to look to the 8th consciousness. This is called the alaya Vijnana, usually translated as store consciousness. So what is it that's being stored? Well, rather than look to the texts, what can we relate to in our own experience that's being stored? Well, it's memories based on the impressions of the discriminating consciousness. So being held in this other consciousness, this stored consciousness. And this is the key. Manas, the mind, can either relate to the discriminating consciousness, or it can relate to the stored consciousness, rather than the contents of the stored consciousness. Relate to what is holding all those memories, all those experiences. It's what is at the basis of what is happening right now, the heart of what is happening right now. And when it does this, we can think of the alaya vijnana, the stored consciousness, as the very ground of our being. This is actually the liberated consciousness. The ninth consciousness, it talks about a ninefold system. This is consciousness in its purest form, in its most fundamental form. We can call it nirvana. There's another word for it, but we don't need to bother about it, because this is what holds everything. And the mind, the defiled mind, can turn to this consciousness. This is the practice of the enlightenment practitioner, of the bodhisattva, turning the mind from the discriminating consciousness to awareness. This awareness which makes us different from machines. This awareness which is essentially the attention. This awareness which is listening to this. This awareness which we constantly overlook and dismiss as not important. It's this awareness which, by looking at this system of Vijnana, points us in the direction of nirvana.